So now we've got into public forum. We have Save Our Venues who have come to the table, please, to talk to us. We have Kendra, Nick, Richard, Taylor and John. I think we got that many. So you have 5 minutes, so far away.
You just speak. Okay. Kia ora koutou, ko Kendra Walls toku ingoa. I'm here today as the music manager of one of Otatahi's live music venues, 12 Bar. Accompanied by representatives from our neighbouring music venues, Darkroom and Space Academy, Taylor McGregor from the National Music Venue Advocacy Organisation Save Our Venues, and John Wardle, a founding member of the Live Music Office of Australia, and we are here to speak to you about the potential problems that we are facing as music venues. Located on St Asaph Street and within 50 metres of each other, Darkroom has been operating for 11 years and was the first music venue in Christchurch to open following the earthquakes. Space Academy opened over the road 4 years later in 2015, and 12 Bar joined the community 3 years ago in 2020. Our collective of venues has become ingrained within the heart of the live music sector, hosting more than 450 shows per annum between us and supporting thousands of professionals across the creative sector, from musicians to sound engineers, lighting techs to event promoters, as well as feeding into the visitor economy of the city that includes transport and accommodation providers. Now we find ourselves, along with many other Christchurch music venues, facing an uncertain future due to the potential land use conflict between sound and noise restrictions and new inner city residents. Development has now begun on 373 St Asaph Street. 18 townhouses are being erected on the adjacent property to all three venues. Our businesses are now faced with the prospect that the sound of live music will now be considered a disturbance to our new residential neighbours, and under current council enforcement process, we may be unable to operate as we have done for many years. Under the RMA, an application for resource consent must identify the persons affected by the activity, and any consultation must be undertaken. As you can see here, there are considered no persons to be affected by this development. That is simply not the case. Not only are our three businesses affected, there are thousands of people involved here, including those within the music industry and the people of Christchurch who attend live music. Otatahi's music industry hasn't had it easy since the 2011 earthquakes destroyed the city's once thriving nightlife. Many grassroots capacity music venues have come and gone. Ducks Live, New City Hotel, Blue Smoke, to name a few. They have all closed their doors in recent years, and as a result of this, Christchurch has fewer small-sized music venues than ever before, with each of our venues constantly having to turn bookings away. Without spaces and opportunities for up-and-coming musicians, they will likely leave Otatahi and look for work elsewhere. No artist arrives in the stadium as a fully formed superstar. Smaller venues like ourselves are the universities that grow world-class musicians. We nurture creatives and we help develop their craft, welcoming emerging musicians of all genres and experience levels to our stages. Many of the most loved and celebrated Christchurch musicians such as Marlon Williams, Aldous Harding, and Yumi Zuma have played some of their first ever gigs on our stages. And without the proper protection, Otatahi risks losing our creative community and cultural vibrancy.
After navigating the immense pressures of the pandemic so far, the grassroots venues of Aotearoa are now threatened with another existential crisis. The push for urban densification in our cities is seeing residential developments consented in the immediate vicinity of music venues. Without appropriate sound attenuation standards and planning instruments that protect the right for venues to host live music, many could conceivably see their operation restricted or made totally unviable. This looming conflict is no more urgent than the situation on St Asaph Street. Music venues are an essential part of the cultural infrastructure of our cities and the heartbeat of New Zealand's music ecosystem. They are significant contributors to a vibrant nighttime economy and shape our city's identity and well-being. It is enormously important that Council recognise the value of their live music venues and use the means available to them to protect and support their future. We're supported today by John Wardle from the Australian Live Music Office. He has worked extensively in policy development and planning regulation in Australia, where he's successfully implemented measures to not only save venues in similar situations, but also work with local governments to design cities that celebrate and incentivise live music in healthy cohabitation with the residential population. While the future for these 3 venues appears uncertain, we hope this is an opportunity to work with Council to take the lead in New Zealand, to develop a solution that ensures they continue to be the heartbeat of live music in Christchurch.
We ask of you today that you work alongside us and the other music spaces in the city to install reassurance that all music has a place within Otatahi. We request that you take all reasonable steps to create acceptable benchmarks for all music venues, new and old, so that we have the confidence to continue operating, and together we can mitigate the potential adverse impacts for our businesses and the cultural and economic identity of the city. Thank you for being here today and listening to us.
Thank you very much. That's a very enlightening presentation. Thank you. No, we haven't got time.
No, not a question to you. Can we ask for some staff advice on the issue and ways to mitigate the issue so that we can continue?
Absolutely.
Yes, I've got a note.
Yeah, we've got a note already. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Sharon. It has. Mhm. Very timely what you came and talked to us about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Annabelle Hasselman and Malcolm Long, who will speak on the behalf of the Opawaho Heathcote River Network regarding the Council's response to the community concerns about the aspects of the Portlink Industrial Park development. Welcome.
Morena, Mayor Major and all the councillors, and congratulations on your appointment to council. This is our first time in front of the council, so yeah.
Good to see you.
So Malcolm and I are here this morning as members of the Opawaho Heathcote River Network to really highlight our concerns around the Portlink development. It's happening right on the banks of the Opawaho Heathcote River, and we really want to reinforce to council the need to make provisions, to enforce the provisions in the district plan that has been established with the protection of the river in mind. So why do we care? Go back to that one. Why do we care? We care because we are the Opawaho Heathcote River Network, and we are a voice for the river, and we advocate for and promote for its regeneration and for the health of the river, and we also connect and support all the communities around the river. Here you can see the Opawaho Heathcote, the catchment groups and all those community groups that have an interest in the river and its catchment. And the next slide shows the Portlink development, the industrial park there right on the banks of the Opawaho River, which is, I'm sure many of you have seen it, and I'll get Malcolm now is going to go through our concerns around it.
So there are several issues. The first one is this photograph. This is an embarrassment to every resident of Christchurch, I'm sure, and particularly for those of Woolston. This is what the Resource Management Act was meant to stop and prevent. The Port Hills being wiped out by some enormous erection of containers. The district plan says quite deliberately 11 metres high for a building. Obviously, the commissioner, when he put that height in place, wasn't thinking that someone was going to subvert it by just putting in containers for storage. So obviously, the council needs to review its storage in industrial areas controls, because this is a ridiculousness that is embarrassing. That's the first issue. The second issue, of course, is the noise, the stacking of these containers early in the morning, late at night, throughout the day, 24 hours a day almost, 7 days a week, is a real problem for neighbours. There is the real danger of containers falling. We've had that at Littleton, we've had it in Bluff and Auckland, 6 high, right next to tracks that people use throughout the day and in the evening. There is a real danger from that. This is the issue that we are most concerned about, the intrusion of these earthworks into the 30-metre setback from the river. It's 30 metres for a reason. It's to give the river its space and to allow the ecology of the river to flourish, and we're down to 6 metres in places here. Why is this bund being created? What's it doing? It's loading up the riverbank. It's restricting public use of this area into a very narrow strip, which will be eroded by the river over time. The river should be, we believe, the primary concern of council, not maximising the area for the developer. You know, Te Mana o Te Wai should be applied here. The river should have the priority. Who knew that fumigation was taking place in this area? MPI knew, EPA apparently knew, the City Council knew that logs were being stacked, but no one apparently knew that fumigation was taking place, or certainly not ECAN. And the Council and ECAN should have known it. Shouldn't have taken a complaint from us for this to be recognised as an issue. The neighbours should have been able to have their concerns addressed and heard. Will that happen? We are concerned that there are hazardous substances being used beside the river without resource consents and suitable controls. Probably this is a good operation. We don't know. We're going to have a look there today. So what we're seeking is that the council staff do enforce the rules of our own district plan, that they protect the river as their highest priority, that the council moves to increase controls over storage in industrial areas so we don't have this problem again and elsewhere, and that we have some sort of improvement in communication between MPI, ECAN and the council over hazardous substance use. You know, there's great public interest in this whole matter, and we believe it's really important that if any resource consent is applied for, that there is a public, it's publicly notified so that the community can be heard.
Thank you very much for that, Malcolm and Annabelle, and it's brought it to a lot of people's attention. I understand that the people who are doing the container storage have moved. They had gone too close to the river, and they have now moved back. Quite how that happened, I don't know. They'd gone over the boundary or too far close to that, so that's been rectified at the moment. And I also understand that there's a discussion on whether a container is a building or not. So that's where that's sitting at the moment. So we'll watch the space and we'll get back to you. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you.
So, okie doke. So now we're into deputations. These people all have 10 minutes each to speak. And the first one is the Netball Centre. Warren is on Zoom, I think. No. On behalf of the Christchurch Netball Centre and Netsol, and Andrew McCormick on behalf of Napunawai Sports Hub, are speaking to item 13. You must be Andrew.
I'm Andrew McCormick, yes, thank you.
Good on you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Warren's not online.
Don't worry, Warren's not online. Thank you.
No, so I'm the chair of the Napunawai Sports Hub Trust. As you'll be aware, that was formed some years ago to provide strategic advice to council around the governance of the facility. Our primary role is really to act as advocates for the sports. And as this hub has developed over time, as you'll be aware, there have been many challenges that we've had. A positive challenge is the development of the Netsol facility. Now, Anna Galvin is the chair of the Christchurch Netball Centre. She sends her apologies, and her deputy Warren Poe is hopefully going to join us by Zoom. But this issue that we're dealing with, that is on your agenda today, is really a Napunawai issue as opposed to primarily a Netsol issue. So the need for extra car parks is becoming a critical point. So the first thing I want to do is thank Council for considering this investment in community sport and recreation, because at the end of the day, this enables active communities, and that's what we're all about. There's been a lot of work that's been done in the last 2.5 years by the Trust, working with Netsol and its various iterations to understand the nuances of the hub. The sports at Napunawai don't have a typical security of tenure that they might have had in the past, and for all intents and purposes, they were rehoused there following the earthquakes, because the four sports all lost their homes. It's an innovative development, and it's one that's a model leader throughout the country. Netsol's come on board, and it's going to bring a tremendous boost to the sporting landscape of the city and the facilities network that you're working through. So as far as the trust is concerned, it's a great boon for the city and for the development. But as I say, it brings challenges. At the moment, Napunawai is increasing its usage. You see young children there, you see older people there on a daily basis. And that's just for the pure recreation of the place. Its accessibility is currently a positive feature. Parking is easy at the moment, but there are pinch points. And as we know, the pinch points come currently in the winter. When rugby league have games on, there's two excellent sand-based turfs there that are the envy of the country. There are two community fields, so they're always busy. And then there's the junior rugby league that's played just across the way down at the AMP showgrounds. There are two international standard hockey turfs there that are busy just about all day, Saturday and Sunday, and of course there's play during the week. So the pinch point on Saturdays has been evident for some time. The overflow car parking was on the grass space that the Netsol building is now being built on. So the problem that's going to arise is that next year, for example, when Netsol, although Netsol won't be on stream by then, the land is out of action. So parking for sports events, for rugby league and hockey, is going to be really at a premium. And that's because the high demand of the venue has exceeded its capacity and its expectations. But of course, that's a pleasing factor, certainly in the Trust's view. I just wanted to show a couple of slides, which hopefully I can control. This shows parking arrangements from last week, which, although this is summer, this is the Canterbury Primary School's Athletic Championships at Napunawai last week. 1,500 child participants plus family support. So with the Netsol site being out of action, this actually replicates what we'll see next year with rugby league and hockey on Saturdays, for example. So this is parking in front of the tennis courts. Here's an example of the numbers that were there competing and spectating. Two shots of that. Biggest day of athletics, certainly for the primary school fraternity. Here's a shot of car parking on the community fields. These are typically used by rugby league in the winter, and that's just another angle. So the point here is that even last week, as we enter summer, if it had been wet, these options wouldn't have been available. So what would have happened is people would have flowed into the streets, and that, of course, raises issues for the community. So that, in my submission, just emphasises the precariousness of the situation here. The Novo report, which I know is in your papers for today, gives very good background about car ratios, the research that was completed earlier in the year, and the Trust is engaging with the sports about alternative options. It's engaging with ECAN about bus routes, not just going past the site, but coming into the site down Augustine Drive. There's the other access through McMahon Drive there as well. And while those options will assist, they're not going to alleviate the key problem that we're concerned about. Another example of a flow-on effect for the sports, which is our concern as a Trust, is strategic traffic management. If there is no provision for extra parking, the sports will bear the cost of having to organise traffic management on a more than pinch point basis. It'll almost become part of their their operational routine. So that cost will be passed on to the users of their sports. And obviously in a user pays world, that's one thing, but if there's an option to minimise cost that's passed on to participants, especially in a community sense, then the Trust would submit that's very important to consider. So ultimately, I would suggest the need for car parks at this venue, these extra car parks, is a measure of its success. It's a measure of the city's increased engagement with sport and active recreation after the COVID environment. It's a daily thing at Napunawai. It's going into the evenings already. When Netball comes on board, it's going to make that even more of an issue. So because of the success of the development, in turn, I'd suggest that the need is self-evident. And this venue is a leader in an issue of partnership. When you think of the work the Trust's doing with Netball to create a partnership, the principles relating to that, principles of operating together, but underpinning it all is the relationship, the partnership between sports, communities, and most importantly, active communities. So what I'd just like to close on is just to touch on the cultural significance of this area. Traditionally, this was an area where mana whenua would gather to refresh and to socialise. What we're seeing now with the use of this site is the same principles, the same actions, the same activities taking place. So in terms of the work that's being done to produce the report that you're going to consider today, I do need to acknowledge the input of mana whenua in a culturally significant way to ensure the sanctity of the river, which in turn feeds into the previous presentation, because of course we know that cultural significance is critically important in our lives now, and what we have here, I'd suggest, is a living, breathing example of that. So unless anyone has any questions, that's my submission on behalf of the Trust.
Okay, no, thank you very much. We've got time for one, if someone wants to have one. No, that's cool. I'll just add, I'm looking forward to one day when we get the other exit out to Wigram Road, which will take a lot of pressure off. It won't help the situation with the amount of cars that are there or vehicles that are there, but at least it'll give you another avenue to move in and out without causing grief at the other end as far as traffic management.
Well, that's exactly right, Mr. Mayor, and even last week was a good example in terms of managing the traffic that you're looking at there, the parking. Sport Canterbury had to open up the McMahon route, otherwise there would have been a terrible bottleneck trying to get out onto Lincoln Road through Augustine. So the more options, the better.
No, that'd be cool. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look forward to item that we're talking about a bit later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, next we have, for 10 minutes, Gary Moore speaking to us about item 19. Welcome, Gary.
Kia ora tātou, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I wish to speak to the 126-page report which you received 2 days ago. In my opinion, to make any decisions based on this immediately would be irresponsible. Mr. Mayor, when I was in your seat, I was an active member of CCHL. I sat there for 12 years. When you have a report in front of you that says phrases like CCC has inherited a portfolio by default and CCC is an accidental owner, that's factually incorrect. Words like asset recycling is asset sales and drag. I believe that this report did not go back far enough. It didn't get, it's over a period where we've had earthquakes, we've had COVID, we've had all those things. You need to go back and have a look at how CCHL performed in the past, and it was a top performer. I think it's time for you to review your board. You need innovative directors, and I would not change the 4 directors on CCHL immediately. I think that's part of a process you've got to go through just to check that you've got, it may be you go down to 2. The chair of CCHL in my time reported to the council every 3 months in committee. Councillors could ask any questions. The CEO of CCC had nothing to do with CCHL in my time, neither did the CFO. It's not their job. The opportunities for us as a city and you as a council and CCHL are all there. For example, our Economic Development Agency was approached by the manager of the Engine Centre at Air New Zealand, and he said Air New Zealand is shifting out. And we started a process which involved, at one stage, the New Zealand ambassador in America, Jim Bolger, finding us a market for the Pratt & Whitney Engine Centre. We put $30 million into it as a council on a site that we owned. And there are 350 jobs on that site still, highly paid engineers. Enable came to us when I travelled overseas and learnt about ports authorities. Seaport, airport, data port. We had the seaport, and we were having problems with the seaport because it was publicly listed. So remember, if you're selling anything, that can be a problem. We had the airport. I tried to get the 25% of the airport for Ngaitahu, and Helen Clark told me which part of jump off the lake into the lake did I want to hear about. And the third bit was we did not have a fibre optic cable. So the chair of the Seattle Trade Alliance, who was a high-powered Seattle person, sent somebody to Christchurch three times to help us get Enable. That became Enable. And so we also had another situation. I tell you these stories because these are your opportunities. The opportunities are there within the company. You need to drive them harder. You'll recall, or those of you of a certain age will recall, when the central cable in Auckland blew up. Orion sent engineers to Auckland because they figured that'd be the cheapest research and development they could ever get. The engineers came back and they said, we're weak as a city, and we put an extra cable in. CCHL approved that. It cost $100 million. The regulatory authority refused to let us get a return on that $100 million, and we said, too bad. That saved us when the earthquake happened. That's about public ownership, and that's about driving your assets well. But I'd like to refer back to the report. It's comparing apples with apples sometimes. Like a lot of these other companies haven't had an earthquake. A lot of these other, and if you look at Wellington Lines Company, where Orion are compared with the Wellington Lines Company, it was for sale at one stage, so Orion went up to have a look at it. After 2 days, the engineers said to the accountants, what do you think? And the accountant said, it's a terrific offer. The engineers said, well, we're going home because their system is stuffed. And in the event of the earthquake, Wellington will be out without power for months. And if we own it, it's our problem. But they've sweated their assets. And so the financial benefit of owning that was seen by the engineers as a mistake. And so they didn't do it. Now, Christchurch is indebted for a number of reasons. One being under insurance, and that's one of the things that always sticks in my craw, because after I left, we went from NZI to the local government insurance, and we're underinsured. And the other bit was there was poor advocating to local government. Christchurch City Holdings Limited dug the council out of the pit. $440 million of capital transferred over. Without that, we'd all be in a serious spot in this city. So I want to make an offer. I've contacted 2 former members of CCHL. David Stock, a highly respected corporate lawyer, who was the architect of CCHL and the companies. And Bruce Irvine, and David was a director for years. And Bruce Irvine, who was a former senior partner of Deloitte's and a former chair of CCHL, have both agreed, and the other person I want to see is Philip Carter, who's unfortunately not here in Christchurch at the moment, because they were all part of the early design of CCHL. So they are all got that corporate but city understanding, which is really, really important. So they've both agreed to take a session for you, Mr. Mayor, and councillors on decisions that have been made in the past and their thoughts on how you could get CCHL to perform better, and that's what we all need. And these 2 have got considerable experience that would be quite useful. So CCHL is a partnership between public and private sectors where we work together to build on what our forebears had struggled to create. Your job is to continue this hard work of your forebears and translate CCHL back into a high-performing asset which the People's Republic of Christchurch can be proud of. The opportunities for growth in your revenue streams in the future reside already within your portfolio. You're just not looking for them, and you need good boards to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. That was very interesting. Have we got any questions, please? Aaron?
Thanks for that, Gary. So just to be really clear, the contact you've made with those former members, or the architects as you call them, is purely for them to come in and give us an unload of all the information on what they did and how they got there,
Yep.
and how it was done. So it's
Yep.
not locking us into them becoming directors or
No,
anything
no,
like
no,
that.
no.
It's purely a reload of the
I don't think
information.
they want to become directors. We're all aging, Aaron.
You can't tell from here, Gary. Okay, just to
Yeah,
just
no,
being
no,
really
no,
clear.
they're certainly not. They're both extremely busy.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Pauline?
Thank you very much for that history lesson, Gary. That was really interesting. And it is always good to go back to how things began and the purpose of it. Just with the rebalancing option that Northingtons have outlined, which basically means being able to possibly sell down shares but keep the portfolio intact financially, keep the money in there, but you might release shares to the market. Do you support that, or do you support? Would you prefer to see no sell down of any shares at all? Like what they call it is for CCHL to become an active portfolio rather than the passive that it is now.
I would support an active portfolio. That's why you need to hear what's happened in the past with shareholding that was listed on the stock exchange, shareholding that we got done over by Otago badly over the port, where we were proposing a pretty exciting sort of a deal because it was listed on the stock exchange. I think it's too quick to actually make calls yet. You need to have a proper debate as a council, and that's why I'm saying don't follow. I would, if I were sitting in your seats, I'd be moving that you receive the paper, full stop, and then start planning early on, because it's got to, if you're doing any changes, it's got to go to the long-term plan, and you've got till the end of next year to do that. Rushing before Christmas, I think, is a mistake.
Yeah, but all we're looking at today is to agree that Northingtons embark on that work for the LTP, and then we make the decision.
I'm aware they're sitting in behind me. I'm not sure about their role, and I think as a council you need to be thinking pretty hard. We had similar sorts of submissions from the Business Roundtable to buy our assets, which we resisted, and that was hard work, I can tell you. And I would think that as a council you need to... First of all, I don't know who appointed Northingtons, what their terms of reference were. I have asked for that under Lagoima, because I think we need to really look hard at who would be the right people to actually give you advice. And I would do that after if you want to pick up David Stock and Bruce Irvine's offer, I'd make that decision afterwards and ask them.
Thank you very much, Gary. We're up to time, but well received. Thank you.
Thank you.